Okay, Tom, so let's start with, why don't you tell us a little bit about why you got into triathlon and why you decided to pursue it?
So I played hockey most of my life, for as long as I can actually remember. And I played about 20 years of National League hockey. So I played with a few clubs around the west of England and the Midlands in the National Hockey League. And if I'm honest, I probably played on a few more years than I should have done. And once I got to the point where I was certain it was time to retire, I decided that I would give something different a go. And the reason is that your stepfather, actually, Lauren, had been pestering me to either take part in a marathon or a triathlon or something. And because I could swim a little bit and I'd done a bit of mountain biking, he sort of nagged me to have a crack at a triathlon with him. And I had been promising for some years. And I didn't really know anything about triathlon at all. And I asked what the hardest triathlon was. And he said an Ironman. And I said, what's the hardest Ironman? And he said Lanzarote. And that was it. We signed up. And that was a year out from the race. And we started training. So that's how it started. And I got into it. So initially it was just a challenge, nothing more. Just it was meant to be a one-off. And I wasn't going to do any other triathlons. I enjoyed the training. The race really had an impact on me, the race day, the race experience, and what I felt as a result of the process and the race itself. And then it sort of started to escalate into a little bit more. I enjoyed the challenge of problem solving, the challenge of self-discovery that triathlon as a sport brings, very uniquely to the sports I've been involved in the past, and it provided an opportunity to feel accomplished on my own terms. A challenge with team sport, obviously, is it's hard to do that, whereas with triathlon I was able to go about the process in the way I wanted to, in a way that represented the journey I wanted to be on, and it really appealed to me. So it sort of carried on from there.
Brilliant, thank you. So, and I'm sure you don't mind me saying that at your age it starts to get a little bit harder. So tell us a little bit about how you managed to stay injury-free in your mid-40s.
Yeah, so this is another question that came in from somebody. And I do get asked this a reasonable amount by people. So I didn't start triathlon till I was 36, pretty much. Obviously that's quite late to be starting. So I'm 40, what am I now? 44? 44? Yeah, 44 now, 45 in July. So I've got into the sport quite late in life. And obviously, as a hockey player, I had got injured a few times. I was never plagued by injury as a hockey player, but hockey's a sport that carries it's quite high impact in ways. And I had a few injuries, most of them impact-based injuries. Sort of acute injuries. I had a serious chronic knee injury when I was in my late 20s, which took me out of hockey for 18 months. And that was weird hereditary condition, we think, where my right kneecap was actually in two pieces and had been causing me some issues with, a type of arthritis in the kneecap was rubbing on my femur, but that has been largely rectified, causing me a few functional movement issues now, but it's generally rectified. So even as a hockey player, I'd stayed reasonably injury-free. But yes, coming into triathlon really late in life with no endurance sports background at all, you would expect me to have got more injured than I have. And I think, bar the odd fortnight here and there, I've barely had any injuries at all. So, I mean, when I say fortnight, I mean a fortnight out of running. I've never been in an enforced period of time out of swimming or out of cycling. I've never been out of running for a long period. I had a very minor calf tear a few years ago and a couple of neurological issues with my calf, but generally speaking, no issues. So how do I avoid that? Well, I guess intuition is one. I'd like to think I'm quite intuitive around. I'm self-coached. I've been self-coached since day one. Obviously, I am a coach, and I'm very privileged to have had a coaching background in my life prior to triathlon, and been surrounded by some very experienced and high-level coaches. So I've learned a lot about coaching. So part of my journey was about being self-coached. That was always part of my challenge. And of course, with that you're required to have a high level of intuition, and I feel like I've got a relatively high level of intuition around how hard I should train, how to read my body, knowing when to push harder, when not to push harder, when to back off, and even during training sessions, how to make sure I move in a way that reduces that risk. So I think that's one of the reasons. From a biking perspective, I've been fortunate enough not to have too many crashes. I mean, I know that obviously a lot of crashes are unavoidable, particularly if cars are involved. I've had one, from my perspective, quite a small one in 8 years. And I think that comes back to a bit of mountain biking. I used to mountain bike in the summer when I was a hockey player, and I'd like to think for a triathlete, my bike handling is reasonably good, and so that probably helps me with limited crashes. From a training perspective, I never ever chase numbers. So I do use data, but only to a limited extent. And I never ever chase numbers in training. So I don't ever aim for certain numbers, whether that be on the run, on the bike, or in the swim. I just, again, I use my intuition to determine how hard I should or shouldn't be going based on what I want to achieve out of that session or that block of sessions. And not chasing numbers means that the risk of injury is much lower, because I'm not trying to do something I shouldn't perhaps be doing on that day. I'm making that judgment call all the time. And that's something that I encourage with all of my athletes too. And we do generally see quite low injury rates amongst our athletes. And then prehab work, and I guess this is a bit of a stock answer, but it is true. I did lots and lots of S&C as a hockey player. So much so I actually had to be patient enough to lose about 10, 12 kilos now of muscle mass over the last few years. That was quite a hindrance as a triathlete at the start, but it's gone now. But yeah, I did a lot of S&C work, which meant that I was quite strong, and obviously that provides my body with quite a lot of protection and effective functional movement. I used to do a lot of circuit training, etc., so a lot of plyometric work. So I do a lot of S&C now, nowhere near as much as I did as a hockey player, but I do plenty. I do weekly S&C, not as much in the season, just because at my age I get worse DOMs and recovery is a bit harder. But all through the off season, I do 2 S&C sessions a week, one sort of upper body and core, one that's lower body and core, no more than that. And through the season, I might maybe do one every 10 days or so. That's a bit of everything, but more movement pattern based than any load. I don't use really any load at all. All of my S&C is done with body weight, and all I do is increase the complexity of the exercises once they get too easy. I do a reasonable amount of soft tissue work, so foam rolling, stuff like that. And obviously, Lauren, you're a sports masseur, that does help.
Yeah.
That's not something that I have that often. Just, again, I don't need it that often unless I've got a particular issue. Yes, I've already mentioned functional movement within my S&C, but I do make sure that my movement patterns are on point. So whether that be on the bike and the run and the swim, a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about their swimming technique. One of the things I do as an athlete and as a coach is spend an awful lot of time thinking through my own cycling and running technique, and we probably encourage our athletes to give as much focus as to their running and cycling technique in their sessions as they would their swim, and we get them to function very consciously in their training. So rather that, for example, than chasing the numbers, can I do this well, rather than can I do it hard? And that's been very important for me in terms of staying injury free as you said, at my age. Nutrition, hydration, they're obviously critical. I do eat well. I drink a lot of water. It has the down sort of going to the toilet a lot again at my age, but it helps quite a bit. As I said, I like to think I eat pretty well. I eat a largely plant-based diet. I don't eat meat anymore. I'm not vegan or vegetarian as such. Well, I guess I'm a vegetarian, but my diet is largely plant-based with some exceptions. So I guess I eat for health. I don't have any sort of strict guidelines that I eat to. And I also maintain my body composition at a fairly even point through the year. So a lot of people's weight goes up, goes down. Some people deliberately go through those cycles. I find that actually that doesn't work for me. If I do that, it puts my body under too much stress. It's easier for me to sustain a fairly consistent weight within about 2 kilos through the whole of the year. And that obviously, being at a relatively low weight most of the time, I'm 178 centimetres, and I weigh normally between 62.5 and 64, maybe 65 kilos at a push. And that obviously means that I'm not stressing my body unnecessarily, because I can do that with a reasonable amount of muscle mass. And sleep, that's probably one area I could improve on, but I am very conscious about my sleeping patterns and trying to make sure that I have good habits around my sleep. And of course, we know that that reduces injury risk considerably. So, you know, a lot of it probably sounds like things you've heard before, but they're not untrue. They're things that you do need to do, and they are things that I do. And whether they've led to me experiencing less injuries, who knows? But I don't, and those are the things that I do. So I guess there must be some benefit from them. So yeah, there you go.
Fab, thank
Okay,
you.
no problem.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your kind of overall weekly, I guess, schedule or volume. Obviously, you race both full distance and 70.3 distance off it. So tell us a little bit about, I guess, how your volume might fluctuate as well through the year.
Yeah. Everybody asks this all the time. This is what everybody wants to know, because of course everybody's trying to find out what the magic formula is. Everyone's like, what training do you do? How much do you do? Etc. etc. And of course, everybody's always stalking each other on Strava and Garmin and Zwift to see how much what they're up to. And I do tend to keep my profiles private if I can work out how to work the tech and stop that people being able to view them. Because you know, not because I'm secretive, but because it's easy for athletes to get distracted by other people and what they do and don't do. But okay, as we've been asked the question by somebody, I'll answer it. So I would say over the course of the year, my training ranges from anything from 10 all the way up to 28 hours, maybe 30 hours at push. I don't know where 28 came from. Sounds like an odd number, doesn't it? But it just seems to happen like that. So 10 hours might be during a proper off-season period. So if I'm like having a week or two where I'm not really doing any training, I might just be out riding my gravel bike, perhaps pop into the pool or the lake a couple of times, just going for a couple of fun jogs. Yeah, I might knock out 10 hours of training. Less than 10 hours is rare for me, just because I enjoy exercise. But on a training camp, I might do, high 20s, maybe even low 30s. I think I've done, low 30s before. Again, not deliberately, it just happens as a part of the process. So yeah, that's probably my range. For the majority of the year, when there's racing, where I'm training with purpose, i.e. at some point I'm going to be racing, the training I'm doing is geared towards a race of some kind. I do race all year, so I normally race in our off season abroad. So I tend to race all the way through. There is generally a break at Christmas for races anyway, even around the world. But I do race here, so I'm always doing a reasonable amount of training. And I'd say it's probably somewhere between 18 and 22 hours. Depending on what race I'm prepping for and what type of training or how I'm feeling as well. Obviously, it's important, but that's probably the bandwidth I'm in most of the year. Yeah. But like I said, I train all year. And what's perhaps a little bit more unique for me is that I have found over the last 8 years that training consistently works better for me. So for some people, having breaks in training works really well. Having on-off season, having down mid-season breaks, that kind of thing. I have done that, but it actually hasn't worked that well for me. I seem to be better maintaining the momentum. Whether it's me, whether again it's an age thing, I don't know. But through the years and the experimentation that I've tried out with training, that has definitely been better for me. It's not very orthodox, but it works. So I don't tend to have big periods of not training. So yeah, that would probably be about the right amount, I think.
Brilliant. And interestingly, I guess, therefore, how have you managed that without the swim element for so much of this year?
Yeah.
We've been getting lots of questions about how people replace that time. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good question, because again, it's a question people keep asking. And we've seen a lot of people obviously get a bit overzealous with other areas of training during periods where they haven't been able to swim in 2020 and now 2021. So what have I replaced it with? Well, I haven't really thought, I need to get my volume up to X, so I'll replace it with this. Functional movement, obviously I've probably done a little bit more of that than I would normally do. A little bit more functional movement work than perhaps in the past, but not a lot. A bit more stretching than perhaps I would normally do. I'm pretty good with my stretching anyway. So at a prehab for my injury. I stretch every single day for about 20 minutes. I have a very specific routine that I've used for a few years now. A little bit more S&C and so functional movement, S&C and stretching. We're very fortunate. People probably know we do have our own endless pool. I say fortunate. I mean, obviously we've made a lot of sacrifices, or you in particular, Lauren, you've made a lot of sacrifices for us to be able to have that. Obviously it's part of our business. It's not open at the moment, but we can use it ourselves. So that helps. But, you're not going to be doing 6-7 hours a week in the endless pool. And I would ordinarily do probably between 5 and 8 hours a week in the pool. So, I'm probably only doing 2 or 3 in the endless pool. So I haven't necessarily replaced it. In the summer, when we weren't in lockdown, I did a lot of gravel riding this year, but kept very, very easy. The benefit of gravel riding was easy to keep it easy, if that makes sense. It wasn't the temptation to push too hard. So that was a really good one for me. And that's sort of, I guess, quite a new thing this year. I mean, gravel riding has become a big thing because gravel bikes seem to have found their identity, and the tech seems to be sorted now. So I did a lot of that in the summer. That probably helped increase a little bit of my volume on the lower end of that aerobic scale. During this lockdown and in other lockdowns when the weather's bad, I just haven't really worried about it. I've just focused on the quality. I thought, well, if the volume's lower, the volume's lower. So what? Just do what I need to be doing rather than anything else. So
brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you. So last question then. This was a great one from sent in from someone. They've asked, when did you start to feel confident in your racing ability, and how did you get there? So what was it, or I guess when, and what was it that started to make you feel confident in your ability?
Yeah, so that is quite an interesting question, and it's actually not a question that I have been asked before. I wonder why that is. And it's not a straightforward question to answer. When did I get confident in my racing ability, and how did I get there? I guess, I wouldn't necessarily describe myself as either confident or not confident. As an individual, despite coming across as quite a confident person, I've not got the highest level of internal self-esteem. That's connected to a lot to do with my own background. I'm quite a complicated person. Like I said, I'm not everybody's cup of tea. For those that know me will testify to. But and I've got a reasonably complicated past. Some of that is as a result of people's behaviours towards me. Some of it's as a result of my behaviours towards others, and they're all interconnected. And triathlon, I guess this links back to the very first question as well a little bit. Triathlon for me has been a bit of a vehicle to help me boost my own self-esteem and feel a little bit happier about my choices in life. Sport is a great vehicle for doing that, and triathlon in particular has been a great vehicle for me to do that. And I guess that's where the journey first started, and it's evolved from there. Never really managed to find that in hockey, whether that was because hockey had been a habit for me because I'd done it from such a young age, or I just never got it. I don't know why. Triathlon has helped that massively for me. And at the start of the journey, that's probably what a lot of it was about. Because of that, it's always been about self-betterment. It's about becoming a better version of myself, using sport as a vehicle, not becoming a better sports person. And triathlon, particularly being an athlete and a coach, offers lots of opportunities to do that. So I don't really have performance and outcome goals. And because I don't have performance and outcome goals, you can't really be confident or not confident, can you? Because if you're not worried about a performance or an outcome, you don't necessarily have confidence or not have confidence in being able to achieve that. That's true for my training sessions as well. Of course, some training sessions make me nervous. Racing makes me nervous because I don't want to make mistakes unnecessarily, but I'm not bound by the performances and the outcomes. So those are not what I'm aiming for. What I'm aiming for is to execute things in a certain way. Don't get me wrong, I don't not set myself performance and outcome goals. I love the problem-solving element of performances, and I love the tactical challenge that comes with chasing an outcome. But they don't define me. I wouldn't want to, for example, win my age group at a race and not execute the plan that I'd set out to or I trained for. That wouldn't, I'd rather not win and have the perfect race. So that helps because you're not worried about those things all of the time. But it is, I guess I am fortunate enough that after this many years of training, combined with the physiology that I guess I have to thank my parents for, at least I am in a position where I can aim for performances and outcomes that, I guess are challenging for me, and, outcome goals, for example, if you're at the sharp end of the field, it makes it easier to have a sort of tactical approach to a race. And I'm very lucky to be able to be in a position to do that. And I don't feel like I want to waste it, which is why one of the reasons why I also work hard, because that feels like a real privilege and it's something that I don't want to take for granted, and I want to do my best to make sure I can utilise that to the best of my own ability. So because I focus on the processes, accomplishment for me is about, my choices and my attitude. And no one can ever take away my ability to choose my attitude or choose my behaviours in any given situation. So it's effectively completely within my control. So the reason I don't feel specifically confident or not confident is because I have a choice. I can either choose to or not choose to. So if I'm not confident that I can make the right choice, well, that's not a very good place to be, is it, really? Because it is simply that. It's knowing the right thing to do and making that decision. And because no one can ever remove that, I don't lack confidence in my ability to make a choice. Sometimes the choice doesn't necessarily lead to an outcome or performance I might have ideally wanted. I'd like to be a professional racer. Athlete. I'd love to be good enough to win Kona, but that isn't reality. I don't feel any less accomplished as an athlete because of that. As long as I'm continuing to make the choices, selecting an attitude that takes me on that continued journey of self-betterment, I'm accomplished. And so, I guess that's it. I know that I can always make those decisions. So in terms of confidence, it's like, well, how can I not be confident that I can do that? That's probably the best way I can explain how I feel about it. However, some people are going to want a specific answer, aren't they? About racing and training. And of course, despite most of my approach to my training and my progression being around my behaviours, my choices, my intuition, all the things that I've kind of mentioned already, and I talk about a lot to my athletes and when I write in blogs, yes, of course, there's still a training process that I go through to create physical adaptation anyway. I don't just willy-nilly train. I don't just get up in the morning and go, I feel like doing this today. This feels right. I do have some sort of structural approach to it. And there's no doubting, and she's going to get a mention again. She often gets a mention, so she'll be embarrassed. But back in 2015, when I was sort of doing reasonably well in terms of performance and outcomes, Caroline Livesey said to me that, progression and unlocking your physiological potential was about consistency, but not about day on day, not about week on week, year on year. And that's something that sat with me that whole time. It really resonated with me, and it became, a really important goal for me within my physical process, and therefore, the way that I chose my attitude, helping to support that physical process, knowing that would make a difference. So I'd say that something we talk about a lot with our athletes, and I think about, is consistent mediocrity. I never train exceptionally well. I never hit big numbers in training. I never perform that well relative to others. I very rarely deliver some of my race numbers in key training sessions. But it doesn't bother me, because for me, because that, if I'm training with consistent mediocrity, that's always a sign that things are in a good place for me. So, that's probably the term I can best use to describe the way that I train. And if I'm doing that, that helps give me the confidence to go on. So, don't think I've really answered the question, have I? When did I become confident? I don't know, because it doesn't really work like that. And I still get imposter syndrome. Everybody does. When you turn up at races, even races that I've done really well at, relative to others, I still turn up and walk around looking at everybody and thinking that everybody's faster than me and looks fitter than me and stuff like that. And sometimes that's not turned out to be the case. So yeah, it's a tricky one to answer. So apologies to the person who did ask that one. I don't know if I've actually answered that at all.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tom. I think there's lots of information there that's going to be really useful to lots of people that follow your journey.
Okay, I hope so.